Hello everyone, and thank you for attending this presentation about reuse. My name is Max Mehl, I work for the Free Software Foundation Europe, the FSFE, and we are a charity that empowers users to control technology. Well, free software. Free software is basically all about licenses that give people the four freedoms to use, study, share, and improve software. And licenses are a legal thing that not only lawyers or legal experts have to take care of, but also developers, so those who create software, users, and also reusers of existing free software. And because licenses tend to get a little bit complicated, and as well as copyright, we created reuse. Reuse is there to make licensing easy for everyone. So let's take a look at an example project, very simple. So we have a C file there and a few other text files and also two images. And now you, as a free software developer, would like to make sure that this is free software and that people understand that it is so. So what people traditionally or often do is they just add one file called license. You see it here. And inside of this license file, there is the license text of the license that you've chosen. This could be MIT, Apache, any of the GPL family. But from the outside you don't know, so you would have to look inside of this text file or have some heuristics or some tools that tell you which is inside of there, which license. Now, this might work if you only have one license in your repository. So basically all files are under one license, so under one set of conditions for reuse. Now, what happens if in this example you have two binary files, so two images, that are from a third party, so perhaps under a different license from a different copyright holder. How do you do that? And here it becomes really complicated. So if you search on the internet, you will find numerous guides how to do that, like having multiple license files and with different naming schemes, and some have a central file where you list like the third party copyrights and licenses. But overall, this is really tricky for humans and really tricky for machines to fetch the license and copyright information of such a project. And as I said, that's why we created reuse. Because we saw a number of issues with licensing. I quickly go over it. So often it's the case that we don't have information about the license and the copyright of either your own software that you already have or third-party code that you would like to use or reuse. And those people who reuse your code often overlook the licenses that you or others have chosen for all files in a repository or just individual files. And then, as I said in the beginning, it's quite complicated how to do with multiple licenses. So you have a Creative Commons and an Apache license. How to deal with that? You often have license ambiguity, so multiple versions of a GPL with exceptions and so on. And all contributors, no matter whether in a company or in a free software project, they need some kind of training or documentation. And if they switch companies or projects and work on multiple ones, that becomes really complex and confusing. And for all of these things, there have been conflicting best practices. But most of them were not really sufficient for all the edge cases. Now, we thought about how can we make licensing and copyright easier for everyone? And out of this thought process, in 2017 we created Reuse. Reuse has a number of basic principles or ideas. So we want to make it easy to find copyright and licensing information for every single file in a repository. And by every single file, we mean that. We want to avoid silos by storing the information about copyright and licensing directly inside of the repository as clear text. So no databases, no web services that can go offline, but directly as close as possible to the files as possible. The information should be readable by humans and machines, so also tools. And we did not want to reinvent the wheel, but be compatible with existing efforts that solve parts of the issues. And overall, we want to make licensing fun and easy for developers, so those people who actually create code. And this should work for all project sizes. So for big teams, for many files, but also for small repositories and projects like we've seen before. Now, reuse exists or contains of 3 simple steps. In the first step, we choose and provide licenses. So we pick a license and store the license text somehow where it can be found. In the second step, we attach the information about copyright and licensing to every single file in this repository. And the third step is quite simple. We confirm the reuse compliance. And now we'll quickly go through the whole process, so you will understand what happens inside of there. So, first step, choose and provide licenses. So we asked code developers, creators, to think hard about the license that they want to choose, because basically that's their conditions for reuse by others. And we asked them to save the license texts inside of a directory that's called licenses. So we don't have this license or copying file, but we have a dedicated place where to store license texts. And we name them after an SPDX license identifier. So SPDX is a cool project that came up initially with a number of unique license identifiers for all those licenses, or many of them, that are out there. So in this case, we have a project with a C file, and our first license is a GPL 3.0 or any later version. So here we store it in the licenses directory. Now comes the second step. We have to add information about copyright and licensing, ideally as a comment in the header of the files. And for this we have 2 tags. The first is the SPDX license identifier tag. So as we've seen with the GPL license identifier in the last slide, we have here in the example below, we have the GPL 3.0 or later. So by this we say this file is under this license. And in this case we have 2 copyright holders. So we can either use the SPDX file copyright text, so that's a pretty nice tag that can easily be found by tools, but also the more traditional copyright fields or comments. So in this case we have Jane Doe and foobar as copyright holders. Now, what do you do if the license or if the file cannot be edited directly, like we've seen before with those 2 image files? In this case, our first suggestion is to create a separate .license file. So this is a simple text file that contains the information about the file with the same name, basically just redacted by .license. And in this case, cat.jpg is under a CC BY 4.0 license, and we have the create artist as a copyright holder. Now, what do you do if you have a directory with many binary files inside of there? So 500 icons. Of course, you could create a .license file for each of them, but of course that would duplicate the number of files inside of there. So for this, we offer the dep5 file. And this can be stored inside of a .reuse directory. dep5 is a format by the Debian project. And in the example below, you can see that all files inside of the IMG folder are under copyright of create artist and the CC BY 4.0 license. So pretty easy. The last step, here we ask people to install the reuse helper tool. So that's pretty nice Python tool, simple to use, simple to install. And the most fundamental command there is the lint command. So we run reuse lint. And this does check for every single file and repository whether there's in some way information about copyright and licenses available, and whether the license text files are available as well. And in this case, the project with 6 files is fully reuse compliant. And the example we've seen in the first place may look like this. So we have for the cat and the dog JPEG files, we have a .license file. We have a number of licensed texts inside of there. And well, the other files inside of there have the information about their copyright and license directly attached inside of the file as a comment. Now, over the course of the year, Reuse developed a lot of components or elements. And of course, the first thing is the specification, so the best practices themselves. And this is quite easy to read still. and it's ready to be integrated by communities and industry. So this is quite formalized. But to lower the threshold, because as I said, we want to make it easy and fun for developers, we created a tutorial and an FAQ. So these form a really low entry barrier and also answer basic questions about licensing and copyright. So not only about reuse itself. Then we have the SAT helper tool, and it does not only check for reuse compliance, but also helps in adding this information to existing files. It can also output a SPDX bill of material, so for those who are interested in that. And another element is the API. It's basically reuse as a service, you could say. And by this, people can simply register their public Git repository and enter it there, register it, and have a quick check about the reuse status of this repository. And they can generate a dynamic badge. And this badge they can add to the README file so that also people can see whether they are reuse compliant or not. So if you're interested in learning more about reuse and applying it, you could first start with signing up the email list that we have and participate in the discussions. So we are quite friendly community, and many of the things how reuse develops are also discussed there. Then you could make one of your projects reuse compliant, of course. So as you've seen, that's quite simple. And for this, we've launched in June Reuse Booster. So go to reuse.software/booster, and this project is there that free software projects can apply and get help from our legal experts of the FSFE. So we help them to become reuse compliant. Of course, they could do it themselves, but sometimes you need a little help from a friend, and we give them a hand. Then, if you represent a community, you could integrate reuse into your policies or guidelines. So this, for example, did the KDE community. And for them, each new project, they ask them to become reuse compliant. Of course, if you're a developer, you could also contribute code to reuse itself. So all our tools, like the API, the helper tool, they're free software and publicly available, so feel free to go to the website and create an issue or even a pull request. But most importantly, please help others to understand and adopt reuse. Share it inside of your community, into your company, your friends. That would be really great, because reuse really is so effective if more people use it, because then code can be reused easily by others, and the creation of code is quite simple, and this makes free software development finally a little bit more fun and easy. So thank you very much. I look forward to the discussion and your questions. And if you need more information, please go to reuse.software. Thank you very much.